WMO, a body of the United Nations, has found that this growth continues to go at a very, very fast pace, that we have not seen any decline despite efforts amongst governments and non-governmental organizations to try to see a reduction in greenhouse gases. All of this, of course, leading up just a short time from now to this Copenhagen summit, when all the world's countries are to come together and really look for a successor agreement to that Kyoto Accord, looking for a way to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. We understand, though, that that process is effectively stalled, that they're in the wake of the financial crisis, countries took their eyes off the ball, if you will, not looking at the environment, not looking at climate change as a priority issue. As a result, very little expected to be accomplished at that Copenhagen summit. No clear sign, for instance, if the United States President Barack Obama will even attend. We understand that Canada's Prime Minister Stephen Harper will not attend that Copenhagen summit. A number of other world leaders, though, will. Britain, Germany, Australia's leaders, for instance.
You know what I find particularly demoralizing about a report like this is that, you talk about everybody making changes on their own. For example, I don't drive my car to work anymore. I take public transit. We each of us attempt to make a change in our own little worlds. And yet this report comes out. What is it saying about the consequences that still await us?
I think that this report really is just looking at what the situation is today. More broadly, of course, the United Nations as an organization has said that it is very, very urgent that these emissions get brought down to what they call pre-1990 levels, trying to reverse some of the damage that they say is now being done. You take someone like Al Gore, who's perhaps the world's foremost speaking person on climate change, certainly in the Western world, and he's talked about, as you say, individual commitments, people trying to drive less, trying to be very cognizant about their carbon footprints. And certainly these little individual actions will add up if everybody's taking care of them. But even he has acknowledged at the end of the day, legislation is probably what is needed to get carbon dioxide levels down, that government has to be in there forcing industry to reduce their emissions. That's certainly his contention. It's been something that's been repeated at the United Nations, though often in far more diplomatic language, that being the United Nations, of course.
Joining us now is Professor Tim Flannery, Chairman of the Copenhagen Climate Council. Thanks for joining us.
It's a pleasure, Tony.
Now, are you part of a vast left-wing conspiracy to de-industrialise the Western world?
Well, it's strange if I am, because the councillors we have on our council, including some pretty big companies, Duke Energy, Intel, China Power International, a number of others. So I don't think there's a conspiracy. But it is interesting to see this sort of this issue raise its head again at this particular moment in time.
Why is it happening?
Well, I think that, the sceptics and those who don't want to see action on climate change realise that we're at the critical moment. And, no matter what Copenhagen produces in terms of concrete outcomes, if there is actually a move to deal with the problem, I think we're then in a position where a very strong message has been sent. A very strong moral message has been sent. We're seeing that in places like Los Angeles, where people want to now phase out coal. Once that becomes a global message, the balance of power has shifted. So this is the moment, I think, where they've really got to stick to the barricades.
Are you surprised at the shifting of the balance of power in the opposition, the Liberal Party in Australia? I mean, Malcolm Turnbull. You advised him in some respects on soil carbon sequestration and other things. But at the same time, he's got this group of now very powerful, vocal climate change sceptics threatening to pull him under.
Well, that's right, but not only pull him under, if they have their way, in my view, pull the whole country under, because we are now moving inexorably towards a global deal to deal with this problem. And I just wonder what those sceptics are going to say in 2018 when, if the Waxman-Markey legislation passes and Australia's done nothing, we'll be subject to border tariffs. At that point, are they still going to be sceptics and say there really isn't a problem? It doesn't matter what the Americans think or the Chinese, there isn't a problem. It's just not a productive position.
What do you say to people like Senator Nick Minchin, though, who believe that what's going on here is something fraudulent, that environmentalists have embraced a kind of new religion? The collapse of communism left them with nothing, and now they've taken on environmentalism with a religious fervour that goes beyond science.
Look, what I just say, I guess, to mention is that it's not just the environmentalists. You know, when you get companies like Alcoa and Duke Energy arguing that we need to have a cap and trade bill to deal with the problem, you're way beyond that. You know, this is now no longer really a scientific debate. It's about politics and about economics now, and that's what's being worked out, you know, virtually as we speak in Australia and in Copenhagen.
Is this... And then Patrick Michaels were saying, no, hang on a minute, it was warmer 1,000 years ago when the Vikings were in Iceland and Greenland, and of course that's why they decided that they'd have to get rid of the medieval warm period, and they achieved that with the hockey stick. In other words, that they completely rewrote the history. And you can see how they've done this, not only with that particular record, but with the historic records as well, the actual temperature records. The Hansen and the group, where they've been reducing the older temperatures, making it colder than it was, which then enhances the warming in the recent times. So the manipulation of records on this level is you have to think it's got to be criminal somewhere.